Hello friends, welcome back to Strategic Management, and we are pursuing the levels of strategy. Here we are focusing upon corporate level strategy and corporate level strategic decision making. The objective here is to understand how strategically managing value chains and developing value webs is to be done or is done by organizations while focusing at the situation from the corporate level itself. That is what we are pursuing in due course of time. And this session, subsequent session and subsequent one or two sessions, I would be focusing upon how this is decided, how this is executed largely, and that is what we have been pursuing at large since at least last one session. So, this is what we were discussing in terms of how organizations and why organizations largely diversify. We talked about low levels of diversification, wherein we talked about single business diversification or and dominant business diversification. Low levels wherein single business and dominant business are the key elements. Then we talked about moderate to high levels of diversification, wherein related constrained situation and related links, mixed related with unrelated is the situation, and very high levels of diversification, and we tried to analyze few of the examples and we tried to think about that. Let us slightly reiterate this and try to elaborate upon this and build upon the story today in this session from this point onwards. So, low levels of diversification, as we were trying to analyze, is wherein a firm pursuing a low level diversification uses either a single or a dominant business corporate level diversification strategy. Single or a dominant business corporate level diversification strategy. Mark these things. Basically, it may sound slightly paradoxical in nature when you say that single or a dominant business corporate level diversification strategy. What does that mean? This means basically wherein you are focusing upon diversification with a single business perspective, and that is where you want to diversify, you are trying to diversify, but with a single business focus. And as we talked about, content based kind of media, developing modes of media and diversifying thereon, we talked about that. So, a single business diversification strategy is a corporate level strategy wherein the firm generates 95% of or more of its sales revenue from its core business area. They focused, they actually had a core business and they were focusing upon that. You see, for example, in earlier stages, many news agencies or people associated, organizations associated with news business, they had newspapers, for example. One of the earliest most stages of as far as delivering news to people was newspaper. So, now probably they were calling those journals at that time. So, now this thing got diversified into several kinds of segments, and wherein elaboration in terms of markets was also done, and number of customers or types of customers were also focused upon. Then modes of operations, collection of news, journalism, all those things that kept on growing, and these businesses they traverse from one stage to the other stage to the other stage, and we have talked about that. But here a single business diversification wherein most of the revenue is of its sales revenue from its core business area, that is newspaper is the mainstay, for example, in simple terms. A bicycle company traversing into being a motorcycle company as such also, or let us say a e-rickshaw company or something else for that matter, or let us say selling frames to other manufacturers as such, but 95% comes from one single core area. With the dominant business diversification strategy, the firm generates between 70 and 95% of its total revenue within a single business area, and that is wherein you are reducing the single business area dominance actually, and you are moving towards the other areas. That is briefly we touched upon that. So, just to reiterate, in moderate and high levels of diversification, a firm generating more than 30% of its revenue outside a dominant business, and last time I told you that these are no sacrosanct figures wherein this is not a formula, but this is the point where authors they wish to signify or give us a picture in terms of the percentage, that this is the largely the percentage, and this authors they have done in basis of on the basis of their experience, analyzing organizations in due course of time, looking at examples and somewhere studying several kinds of organizations and so on. So, 30% of its revenue outside dominant business and whose businesses are related to each other in some manner uses a related diversification corporate level strategy. Production operations can be one thing which relates these kind of businesses, suppliers can be the other thing which can relate to these businesses, or both can relate to these businesses. Even market on one side can relate to these businesses. There is a cord, and we talked about that. When the links between the diversified firms' businesses are rather direct, a related constraint diversification strategy is being used. Procter & Gamble uses a related constraint strategy. With a related constraint strategy, a firms share resources and activities between its businesses. Similar kind of raw material, similar kind of suppliers, similar kind of technological inputs, several kinds of things can be shared, similar kind of software can be shared and so on, and wherein you put up a picture wherein the common chord traverses between these kind of diversified portfolios, you may say, businesses we can say. Then the diversified company with a portfolio of businesses that have only a few links between them is called mixed related and unrelated firm and is using the related linked diversified strategy. Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, General Electric use these corporate level diversification strategies. You can go to their website and you would realize that there is a chord which explains this kind of an example. It is a very simple kind of a thing. We may go into elaboration. I have talked about that briefly also. You may choose to look at the examples right now in front of you, and you would realize that, for example, electrical appliances companies, for example, electronic companies, for example, white goods companies, for example, compressor based organization wherein they produce refrigerators. Compression technology is same, so that can be used for developing smaller compressors and larger compressors and refrigerator compressors and air conditioning compressors and several kinds of things basically. So similar kinds of technologies can be used for similar kinds of different kinds of products and producing different kinds of things altogether. Mitticool produces casseroles, refrigerators, water bottles, utensils, all with mud. Different kinds of products for different kinds of usage by same kind of a customer or different kinds of customers by the same raw material. So that can be done. So you see, that is the point basically. Compared with related constraint firms, related linked firms share fewer resources and assets between their businesses, concentrating instead on transferring knowledge and core competencies between the businesses. This may have happened because of the era also. Many a times you see when authors would have been thinking in terms of how to write about these kind of two different things which are quite similar to each other, the constrained linkages, the related constrained firms and related linked firms. So how to differentiate this between these kind of things, basically examples are there. Procter & Gamble can fall into the same category few years back, and they can also fall into the similar the second category few years later. Why it would have happened? So when these related constrained firms were evolving, this kind of a diversification is observed. At that time, production operations is the mainstay, or supply chain is the mainstay, suppliers are being focused upon, or operations are being focused upon, and that is how the era is all about. Today it is knowledge economy. Today there are many things associated with software, today there are many things associated with software acumen, and there are many things which are related to virtuality. There are many things which are related to as far as virtual environment goes. There are many things related to soft acumen which is driving so many things, apps for example. So at one part of time it was a production operation based kind of economy, supply chain based kind of an economy, and or structure around organizations, and today it is a knowledge based kind of a structure. So this kind of a change would have evolved because of the overall structure which would have been evolving. So that is how this kind of a differentiation would have also evolved in due course of time, and that is quite natural also. Here the lesson is that there are several kind of external environmental changes which are going on, which actually motivate the firms to take corporate level decisions which can fall into a different kind of a category altogether. But the lesson which we are trying to derive here has a logical basis. The logical basis is that there is a progression, there is a pattern from this stage to that stage on the basis of the capabilities, core competencies, resources on one side and the environmental forces on the other side. And that is how this structure, the low level, this low levels of diversification to moderate and high levels of diversification, and then constrained firms, related constrained firms and related linked firms would have evolved or has actually evolved. If you will look into the data and patterns, you would realize, and for that matter you must read the history of the organizations. So, very high levels of diversification, a highly diversified firm that has no relationships between its businesses follows an unrelated diversification strategy. Samsung is an example of firm using this type of corporate level strategy. Commonly firms using this strategy are called conglomerates. Hyundai manufacture cars and they have a construction division. LG, they have a large chemical factory, chemical production system all around, and on the other side they are into automotives, they are into electricals and electronics, and they are into so many kinds of business altogether. You would look at these conglomerates and you would realize that they are into so many things, and same is with the Reliance, same is with the Tatas, and same is with so many kinds of organizations all over the world, Haier, Sansui, Hyundai, Honda, LG and so on. So, you would find them very, very large. BYD for example, they are large, although they are more known for as far as their renewable energy kind of a types of businesses they are developing all around them, but they have developed a complete ecosystem around them, and there are so many other kinds of organizations which belong to conglomerate category. There are n number of conglomerates, and one thing very important which I want to suggest here is that if you will try to study the history of organizations, you would realize that there has been an era wherein these type of diversifications have been exemplified in concentration. For example, low level of diversification was an era belonged to such kind of a strategy, corporate level strategy, wherein people were having low level of single business focused kind of diversification, wherein most of the revenue is coming from a single business kind of a thing. As I said, environmental forces, resources and capabilities are responsible for those kind of things, or most of the times people are looking at things with a similar kind of a perspective, and and a period, an era is going on that way. Competitive forces are thinking alike more or less. Many people are trying to think out of box, but then people are into the similar kind of a frame, basically a thought process is going on, and that is how whole of this business environment is developing and dwelling upon a fundamental similar kind of a philosophical thought. Then comes in moderate kind of a thing, basically moderate and high level of diversification, and many organizations you would find that in that particular kind of a period, many organizations belong to that kind of a situation, belong to that kind of an era and so on. And now you would realize that if you will look at and if I am not wrong, from 70s to current period, basically more or less last decade also, conglomerates rose to heights. Now for past decade or so, a new trend has started developing wherein knowledge based non-conglomerates, I would say, the organizations which have moderate to high level of diversification are again evolving, and then you would realize that there are many organizations which are focused into so many kinds of related businesses wherein moderate to high level of diversification is evident, but conglomerates, it's not that kind of a rampant kind of a phenomena, or a valid or largely witnessed kind of a phenomena which we can see in larger numbers as of now. So, again a different kind of a trend is foreseen as far as the business scenario goes. Reasons for diversification. What are the reasons for diversification? And that is what I have tried to initiate as a discussion point. A firm uses a corporate level diversification strategy for a variety of reasons. Typically, a diversification strategy is used to increase the firm's value by improving its overall performance. We have talked about that, overall situation in terms of market growth, in terms of revenue, in terms of stockholders value, in terms of brand value, so overall performance of a firm. Value is created either through related diversification or through unrelated diversification when the strategy allows a company's businesses to increase revenues or reduce costs while implementing their business level strategies. Ultimately, it is a matter of generating value. But here authors, they give us a very important clue, and researchers, they have observed organizations with completely diagonally opposite view also. How? They say that other reasons for using a diversification strategy may have nothing to do, mark these words, may have nothing to do with increasing the firm's value. On one side it is focused on firm's value. Now you would say that if it has nothing to do with increasing the firm's value, then what's the fun like? But then it happens, and that is what all authors have observed. So they may have nothing to do with increasing the firm's value. In fact, diversification can have a neutral effect or even reduce a firm's value. Then why is it done? We will see. We will discuss this point, that why is it done. Many a times, it's just that we have to diversify, we have to, because diversification somehow signifies growth, or at least feeling of growth, as I would put it. And authors have observed that there are many portfolios which organizations they would have included in their ambit, but those might not have worked. And you would realize when we will be talking about mergers, acquisitions and joint ventures, that many a times people do acquire companies just to enhance their strength in terms of their brand value or stockholders value, in terms of when they want people to realize that they are doing this plus this plus this, and they hold these kind of portfolios. But many a times they hold portfolios which are not so profit making organizations along with them, but although they are just contributing as far as the brand upliftment goes for a while, and those businesses are shelled off in many cases. It would be slightly premature if I quote this example, but Ranbaxy was acquired by Daiichi and then finally by Sun Pharma. So if you will read into this story, you would realize that somehow it signifies a thought which I am putting in front of you. Somehow you would realize that similar kind of a thought was associated with acquisition of Ranbaxy by Daiichi when they wanted to expand into Indian market somehow, and on the other side when they sold it to Sun Pharma wanted to acquire it for a different kind of a reason basically. And similar kind of a thing you would observe in terms of when Tatas they acquired, they went for Land Rover deal, and then on the other side Jaguar came along, and somehow the story went on in terms of so you can read about these kind of things through case studies, through references, through websites, and you would realize that there is a context of no value, neutral value, or even reduction in value many a times. So that many a times happens, and we will be talking about that at length. Now here is a structured perspective around reasons for diversification. So when we talk of and it is divided into three spheres as authors they have done. So one is value creating diversification, then other is value neutral diversification, the third is value reducing diversification. Value reducing diversification, you see, but the question would always remain, why would they be doing this? And we will find about that. So when we talk of value creating diversification, which is the most important thoughtful kind of a diversification which people do, and I would be talking about that in mergers, acquisitions and joint ventures also. Many a times people ask me that mergers, acquisitions and joint ventures are thoughtful strategies. I say that yes, there is a lot of deliberation and thought process which goes into that, but there are so many question marks, and I would be talking about that. So economies of scope are associated with value creating diversification. Economies of scope, that is related diversification, wherein sharing activities and transferring core competencies are the two key points. We will be talking about that. Market power, that is again related diversification, wherein blocking competitors through multi-point competition and vertical integration. So moving up and down in the supply chain. So we will be talking about that. Financial economies, unrelated diversification, wherein efficient internal allocation is done and business restructuring is done many a times. So that is how largely value creating diversification. And when we talk of value is a number basically. That is in one word, if you want to decipher value, is number. So largely as of now, just think of it as a number. Value neutral diversification. So antitrust regulation, tax laws, low performance, uncertain future cash flows, risk reduction for firms, tangible resources, intangible resources. So these might not increase that number somehow, but you have to go for diversification at one part of the time or other part of time. But if you will realize and if you will study value neutral diversification and the elements associated with value neutral diversification, for example, low performance. So, you are diversifying as far as with this perspective or this key point, which might not add value at this moment, but you will realize that once you do that, in due course of time, that may be converted into value, or that should be converted into value. May not, or may not, cannot be a point of discussion as of now, but it should be. The intent is that it should be getting converted into value some part of time. Then value reducing diversification, diversifying managerial employment risk, increasing managerial compensation. Now, increasing managerial compensation at this point can be seen as value reducing diversification, wherein somehow you have to spend more, but at the end of the day this would add to value as it is presumed, and that is the point basically. So, as of now it might be looked upon as value reducing diversification, but definitely in due course of time, if it is done well, then it would be getting converted into value creating diversification at one part of time. So, value creating diversification or in terms of related constraint and related linked diversification, and how should we be looking upon that. So, with related diversification, corporate level strategy, the firm builds upon or extends its resources and capabilities to create value. The company using the related diversification strategy wants to develop and exploit economies of scope between its businesses. Want to develop and exploit economies of scope between its businesses. Economies of scope are cost savings that the firm creates by successfully sharing some of its resources and capabilities, or transferring one or more corporate level core competencies that were developed in one of its businesses to another of its businesses. And this is a very natural process which is associated with as far as the companies go, as far as sharing the resources basically. For example, you are buying raw material from one particular source for one of your companies, and the same buying practice or structure can be utilized for buying raw material, similar kind of a raw material from the same source for a different company. Very simple crude example. So, that can be seen that way. Value creating diversification strategies in terms of operational and corporate relatedness, and now as I said, there can be reasons, operational, market reasons and so on, and largely it is evident according to this kind of a structure. So, let us see how authors they wish to demonstrate that. So, operational relatedness, sharing activities between businesses. How do you share activities between businesses? There are many ways, but let us look at this matrix. So, there is a low level of sharing of activities between businesses, there is high level of sharing of activities between businesses, and then on the horizontal axis it is corporate relatedness, transferring core competencies into businesses at low level and at high level. So, if both of these things are low, it is unrelated diversification. If operational relatedness, sharing of activities is high, that is related constrained diversification. If operational relatedness or sharing activities and transferring of core competencies is high, both operational and corporate relatedness is there, and if only transferring of core competencies into business is high, related linked diversification is there. So, this is the larger matrix based kind of a structure. Let us see, let us try to elaborate upon this very briefly. So, firms seek to create value from economies of scope through two basic kinds of operational economies: sharing activities, operational relatedness, and transferring corporate level core competencies, corporate relatedness. The difference between sharing activities and transferring competencies is based on how separate resources are jointly used to create economies of scope. To create economies of scope, tangible resources such as plant and equipment or other business unit physical assets often must be shared. You are using same plant and production facility for manufacturing two different kinds of products basically. You are an engineering based kind of an organization. You are a sugar mill. One fine morning, one sugar technologist, he tried to explain it to me that same sugar plant facility can be prospectively used for crushing other agri products also, because ultimately you are crushing sugar cane. So, that is what he tried to explain it to me. But you see what I am trying to put up here is that, for example, you are an engineering kind of you are an assembling kind of an organization where you are assembling one kinds of products, and you can assemble other kinds of products as such also, because you have a human resource which is equipped and talented in terms of assembling those kind of things, and you have production facility wherein you can do that. So, operational relatedness is there. So, wherein you are using business unit physical assets often must be shared. Less tangible resources such as manufacturing know-how can also be shared, as I am saying, manufacturing know-how by using similar kind of human resource. However, know-how transferred between separate activities with no physical or tangible resources involved is a transfer of corporate level core competence, not an operational sharing of activities. This plant and facility is not to be utilized, but the acumen, the knowledge can be utilized for a different kind of a thing, basically, more or less. Can we think in terms of moving our human resource from a motorcycle manufacturing unit to a scooter manufacturing unit, or to some other engine manufacturing unit, or to something other which is engineering dominant kind of a thing? Basically, can we utilize similar acumen of electronic manufacturing, television manufacturing for, let us say, producing computers and laptops and other kind of a hardware by similar kind of a human resource if required at one part of time? And if we start doing that both in the same facility, then both of the things, the right upper corner has been achieved in that matrix which I showed you. So, there are several kinds of things which can be assumed and which can be done with a similar kind of an orientation as we are discussing at this moment. Operational relatedness, wherein sharing activities is the key. So, firms can create operational relatedness by sharing either a primary activity such as inventory delivery systems, or a support activity such as purchasing practices. I talked about that. Firms using the related constraint diversification strategy share activities in order to create value. How to maximize the value? The point is that logically how should I be maximizing the usage of this particular resource which I am having at this kind of a moment? Procter & Gamble uses this corporate level strategy. Procter & Gamble's paper towel business and baby diaper business both use paper products as a primary input to the manufacturing process. Very logical. The firm's paper production plant produces inputs for both businesses and is an example of a shared activity. In addition, because they both produce consumer products, these two businesses are likely to share distribution channels and sales networks as well. Similar things can happen in sugar mills also. Similar things can happen in several kinds of food processing units also. Similar things can happen in baking product based organizations also. Different kinds of food products can be developed in due course of time in similar kinds of facilities and so on. Is Haldiram doing that? Definitely, I think they must have been doing this. So, that is the perspective around as far as sharing activities goes. Corporate relatedness, wherein transferring of core competencies. So, corporate level core competencies are complex sets of resources and capabilities that link different businesses primarily through managerial and technological knowledge, experience and expertise. Firms seeking to create value through corporate relatedness use the related link diversification strategy. First, because the expense of developing a core competence has been incurred in one of the firm's businesses, transferring it to a second business eliminates the need for the second business to allocate resources to develop it. Very logical. Such is the case of HP, Hewlett Packard, where the firm transferred its competence in ink printers to high-end copiers. Similar kind of a thing. Printing and copying is more or less similar. Rather than the standard laser printing technology in most high-end copiers, HP is using ink-based technology or has been using ink-based technology. Now they have traversed into different kinds of printers and so on, and many organizations which did not do that. For example, Xerox could have done this. So, if they would have done this, then the sphere would have been different, and that is where the key point is. You see, ultimately it's a matter of defining value, deriving value. I will be coming back to you with lots of discussions on other kinds of aspects in relation to diversification, and I will try to elaborate on the finest of the elements which we have talked about when we were discussing about value creating, value neutral, and I would not say that value reducing, but definitely authors have observed that. So, value reducing diversification also. I will be catching up back with you. Till then, goodbye.